On a warm summer evening in rural Ohio, 20-year-old Sierah Joughin said goodbye to her boyfriend and began the short ride home on her new bicycle. She never made it. Within minutes, she vanished from a quiet country road less than half a mile from her front door, leaving behind only scattered clues in a cornfield and a community desperate for answers. 3 days later, investigators would uncover a hidden chamber of horrors that revealed this wasn't the first time her killer had struck. How could someone with such a dark history remain invisible until it was too late? Drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts on this heartbreaking case. The disappearance of Sierah Joughin would expose critical gaps in how communities track violent offenders. This wasn't a random act of violence by an unknown predator. The man responsible had attempted nearly the identical crime 26 years earlier, served minimal time, and returned to the same quiet roads where he'd first struck. What unfolded in July of 2016 would ultimately change Ohio law forever, creating protections that came too late for one young woman whose only mistake was riding her bike home on a summer night. This is the story of how a preventable tragedy sparked lasting reform, and why the name Sierah Joughin now stands for something far greater than the horror that took her life. Sierah Joughin was born in February of 1996 in the small Ohio community of Sylvania, the first of 5 children in a close-knit family. Those who knew her described a young woman impossible to miss. She possessed boundless energy, a contagious laugh, and a personality that filled every room she entered. Her mother Sheila often said there was never a quiet moment when Sierah was around, and her daughter wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Friends recalled how Sierah would dance through their high school hallways, sometimes even wearing the cheerleading uniform despite not being on the squad, all to make people smile. She had a gift for drawing others out of their shells, making even the shyest person feel comfortable and included. Her aunt later said you could take Sierah anywhere and know she'd make a friend before the night was over. At 13, while still in high school, Sierah met Joshua Kolosinski. What began as young first love endured through the years that typically tear teenage relationships apart. 7 years later, they were still together, now talking seriously about marriage after college. They shared a love of the outdoors, sports, and traveling together. Josh would later joke that he rarely won arguments with Sierah. She had a fierce independence and unshakable confidence. When she made up her mind about something, there was little point in trying to change it. By the summer of 2016, Sierah was preparing to enter her junior year at the University of Toledo, where she studied business with aspirations of working in human resources. She was interning at her uncle's company that summer, enjoying the warm weather and freedom before another academic year began. The rural landscape of Fulton County, with its winding country roads and sprawling cornfields, provided the perfect backdrop for long bike rides with Josh. Life felt full of promise and possibility. The evening of July 19th, 2016 began like countless others that summer. Around 6:45, Sierah and Josh were riding together, him on his motorcycle and her on the purple bicycle she'd recently purchased. They were headed back to their respective homes along the peaceful roads they knew so well. The route was only about 7 miles, and as they neared Sierah's house, she insisted Josh could turn around and head back. Ever independent, she told him she could handle the last couple miles on her own just fine. It was still bright outside, the evening warm and calm. After riding alongside her for a few more minutes, Josh finally agreed. They kissed goodbye. He told her he loved her and asked her to text when she got home. He watched as she pedaled away into the distance, disappearing among the tall cornfields that lined County Road 6. But the text never came. As the evening wore on, Josh's messages went unanswered. His calls began going straight to voicemail. Growing increasingly worried, he finally called Sierah's mother Sheila, who had been out that evening and assumed her daughter was still with Josh or already home safe. The realization that neither of them had seen Sierah in hours sent waves of panic through both families. Something was terribly wrong. Later that evening, a deputy discovered Sierah's bicycle several rows deep in a cornfield near where she was last seen. The scene told a violent story. Motorcycle tire tracks cut through the field. broken cornstalks bore reddish-brown stains that appeared to be blood. Scattered around the area were items that seemed completely out of place. Men's sunglasses, an orange-handled screwdriver, an automotive fuse box, and one of Sierra's socks stained with blood. The evidence pointed toward a calculated attack and a struggle. This was no accident. Someone had forced her off that road. The searches intensified through the night, with hundreds of volunteers combing vast stretches of cornfield in the darkness, their flashlights scanning for any sign of the missing young woman. The rural landscape that had seemed so peaceful now felt menacing and endless. Every broken cornstalk could be a clue. Every shadow could be where Sierra lay injured and waiting for help. But as dawn broke with no sign of her, hope began to give way to dread. A local farmer provided the next crucial piece of evidence. He'd picked up a bloodied motorcycle helmet from the roadside the night Sierra disappeared and tossed it in his truck, not thinking much of it at the time. Now he brought it to police. Bloodstains covered the helmet, and investigators found fingerprints as well. They were now certain a motorcyclist was involved. Investigators began canvassing the sparsely populated area, going door to door to every residence near where Sierra vanished. One of those stops was at a property on County Road 6, the very road where Sierra lived. The home belonged to 57-year-old James Worley, who lived there with his mother and ran a motorcycle repair business from the property's barns. From the moment he opened the door, Worley's demeanor struck investigators as wrong. He was defensive and argumentative, making the conversation difficult from the start.
Who are you?
Yeah, we work on that violent crime task force.
Okay. So,
And I'm with the state.
okay. So you guys got some suspicions for something here. So you're gonna tell me that this is all under the guise of just checking every household, and you're not here for any particular reason.
There's a young lady that's
I'm not out there killing chicks, dude. I don't have relationships. I mean, I'm trying to get one started online a little bit right now. But, and she's been out here. Guess what? She went home alive.
Is there anybody in the...
But what he said next made investigators' blood run cold. Worley admitted he'd been riding his motorcycle in the exact area where Sierra disappeared, at the exact time she went missing. He claimed his bike had broken down, and he'd lost several items: a helmet, a screwdriver, and a fuse box, the very objects found at the crime scene. The story seemed absurdly convenient, almost as if he was trying to explain away evidence before investigators even mentioned what they'd found. One detective later said his jaw nearly dropped at the audacity of the explanation, but without concrete proof, they couldn't arrest him yet. They needed a search warrant. When investigators ran Worley's background, they found something that made pursuing that warrant urgent. In 1990, Worley had been convicted of abducting a woman named Robin Gardner under eerily similar circumstances. She'd been riding her bicycle on a rural road when Worley struck her with his truck, held a screwdriver to her throat, and attempted to force her into his vehicle while threatening to kill her. Only through incredible courage did she manage to escape. Worley served just 3 years of a 4 to 10-year sentence for that crime. The parallels were impossible to ignore. 26 years apart, 2 women on bicycles, the same rural area, the same methods, the same offender. Armed with a search warrant, investigators returned to Worley's property. What they found in his barns would haunt them forever. One barn contained a crate filled with women's lingerie and an empty freezer buried underground, its interior stained with blood. The freezer had been lined with carpet and reeked of bleach, suggesting recent cleaning. Throughout the barn, investigators found zip ties, duct tape, rope, handcuffs, weapons, pepper spray, and hidden cameras. A blood-stained mattress lay on the floor. The entire structure appeared designed for one purpose: to hold captive and torture victims without anyone hearing their screams. The nightmare scenario became reality. On July 22nd, 3 days after Sierra disappeared, a volunteer searcher noticed disturbed soil in a cornfield along County Road 7, a few miles from Worley's property. When investigators began digging, the smell confirmed their worst fears. They found Sierra's body in a shallow grave. She'd been hogtied, with her wrists handcuffed behind her back and bound to her ankles. She wore an adult diaper. A plastic dog toy had been forced into her mouth and tied in place, obstructing her airway and causing her to suffocate over several agonizing minutes. One of her teeth had been broken, apparently from the force of inserting the gag. There was no evidence of sexual assault, but the sheer brutality and degradation of what she endured was almost beyond comprehension. James Worley was arrested that same day and charged with aggravated murder, kidnapping, abduction, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. He pleaded not guilty to everything. The trial began in March of 2018. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including Sierah's DNA found on Worley's motorcycle helmet, inside his barn, on duct tape, and on items of clothing. Cell phone data placed him at the scene of the abduction during the time Sierah went missing. His internet search history from the day of the murder showed he'd spent hours watching violent content, specifically searching for terms related to binding and strangling. Investigators believe the attack unfolded like this. Worley passed Sierah on his motorcycle, then hid in a cornfield further up the road and attacked her as she rode past. He struck her with his helmet, dragged her into the corn, and restrained her. He left her there bound while he went to get his van, then returned after dark to transport her to his barn. The timeline of her death couldn't be precisely determined, but evidence suggested she may have been held for some period before she died from the gag that suffocated her. Robin Gardner, the woman who survived Worley's attack in 1990, testified at trial. She told the court she felt compelled to be Sierah's voice, to speak for someone who couldn't speak for themselves. She said she knew the fear Sierah must have experienced because she'd felt it herself. Worley's defense was weak and contradictory. He claimed the disturbing setup in his barn was for filming adult content. He suggested his helmet ended up in the cornfield the day before, when his bike broke down, purely by coincidence. He even implied at one point that someone else had used his property to commit the crime while he was away.
Hello everyone. Since the onset of this thing, I have been instructed to remain silent and to say nothing. And that is good advice to just anyone who is in any kind of predicament with the law. The less you say, the better off you are. First and foremost, I want to say that myself, my family, everyone that I know is heartbroken for the Joughin family. Make no mistake. Now, the person who used my helmet, who found it after I lost it, I truly believe she was attacked, and then my big, goofy shows up with my body. He's got her subdued. I don't know where. I don't have those answers. He took that helmet, he left the palm print on the helmet. The DNA found under her fingernails, not my DNA. And during the 2-3 days he had Sierra, I believe she was what? Literally kept under subdued and kept under control. Don't ask me why she wasn't there. She was a beautiful girl, but she wasn't, and I'm glad.
None of it held up against the mountain of forensic evidence. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found Worley guilty on 17 counts. They recommended the death penalty. During sentencing, the judge, clearly disgusted, said if there were any chance Worley was innocent, he'd be looking at life in prison, but there wasn't even a remote possibility. Worley was sentenced to death with an execution date originally set for June 3, 2019. That execution has been delayed multiple times due to appeals and Ohio's broader moratorium on lethal injection. Worley's most recent execution date of May 20, 2025 was stayed due to pending defense motions, and no new date has been set. He remains on death row at age 66. His appeals have all been denied, with the Ohio Supreme Court unanimously affirming his conviction and sentence. Investigators have never stopped wondering if there were other victims. In August of 2020, the FBI and Fulton County Sheriff's Department conducted another search of Worley's former property using excavation equipment, though officials wouldn't comment on what prompted the renewed investigation. Worley's own sister testified during trial that he'd been suspected in at least 3 other murders or disappearances over the years, though he was never charged. The hidden chambers, the buried freezer, the extensive collection of restraints, it all suggested someone who had refined these methods over time. But from unspeakable tragedy came meaningful change. Sierah's family channeled their grief into action. Her mother Sheila and Aunt Tara founded Justice for Sierah, an organization dedicated to preventing similar attacks through education and self-defense training. Another program called Keeping Our Girls Safe was created by Sheila and Josh's family, providing self-defense classes and community education. As of this year, thousands of young women have received personal safety training through these programs. Most significantly, Ohio lawmakers passed Senate Bill 231 in December of 2018. Known as Sierah's Law, the legislation created Ohio's first geographically searchable registry of violent offenders. Anyone convicted of aggravated murder, voluntary manslaughter, kidnapping, or abduction must now register with their local sheriff's office within 10 days of release from prison. They must re-register annually for at least 10 years, and failure to comply is itself a felony. The law passed both chambers of the Ohio legislature unanimously. Sierah's family believes that had such a database existed in 2016, investigators might have identified Worley as a suspect much sooner, possibly even in time to save Sierah's life. Every year, the community honors Sierah's memory with events including the Spirit of Sierah 5-kilometer race and a memorial motorcycle ride that draws hundreds of participants. A scholarship bearing her name helps students pursue their educational dreams. Her former high school dedicated a memorial tree and plaque in her honor. Sheila has said that while Sierah's life was cut devastatingly short at just 20 years old, her daughter has accomplished more in death than many do in a lifetime. Through Sierah's Law, through the safety programs created in her name, through the thousands of women now equipped with knowledge and skills to protect themselves, Sierah Joughin continues to save lives. Her aunt said it perfectly. They may have been broken by grief, but because they were loved by Sierah, they became unbreakable. The woman who loved to make people laugh, who danced through hallways just to brighten someone's day, who had dreams of helping people through a career in human resources, she's still helping people now. Her legacy isn't defined by how she died, but by how her life and death sparked change that will protect countless others. In the rural Ohio community where she grew up and died, Sierah Joughin's name will forever stand for courage, resilience, and the power of turning unimaginable loss into lasting hope.